I am divorcing you to marry the boss's daughter. Get out now.
My husband came home from work and slammed down a completed divorce application form on the table. We had just had our first child and I thought we were building a life together. But my husband threw these unbelievable words at me.
I'm going to be the next CEO. No hard feelings.
Unable to comprehend what he just said, I hugged our 3-month-old daughter and stood in disbelief. Before we knew it, he had kicked us out of the house. Outside, it was pitch black, and a cold wind was blowing like a storm. Unlock the door, please. I banged on the door several times, but my husband didn't come out. I was left holding my young daughter at a complete loss for what to do. My name is Jessica. I'm 27 years old. My mom divorced when I was little and raised me by herself. Just when I was planning to take care of her in return, she got seriously ill and passed away 3 years ago. Around that time, George, a co-worker 3 years my senior, was always there to support me through the tough times. Eventually, we started dating and got married 2 years ago. But then, just when I thought we would start a warm family life, my husband betrayed me. With no parents or friends to rely on, all I could do was wander a dark path, clutching my young child and my anxious heart. Then I started recalling my husband's recent suspicious behavior. It began 6 months ago. He suddenly said he was getting busier at work and started going on frequent business trips. Even on his days off, he said he had to go out for work golf.
Make sure to lay out my new golf attire. Shine my shoes and golf clubs.
You're golfing again? Why don't we spend the day off together?
Golf is part of my job. Besides, being with you doesn't benefit me at all. Just be quiet and do as you're told.
He never used to talk to me like that. Even when I argued, he wouldn't listen to me. I started to worry as my belly grew larger with our child. But once the baby is born, he will return to the kind person he used to be. I spend my days dreaming of a bright future for our family of 3 and praying for the growth of our unborn child. About a month after I gave birth, things changed. My husband began to scrutinize my struggling face.
You were never a beauty, but you have aged even more after giving birth. You really are unattractive.
I have to take care of the baby and the house. I don't have time for beauty care.
That's just an excuse. Ugh. Why did I marry a poor and unattractive woman? The only saving grace was your cooking, and I'm tired of that too.
Unable to argue back due to exhaustion, my husband told me he didn't even want to be in the same room with me and locked himself in the bedroom. Since then, I have been sleeping on the living room couch while taking care of our daughter. It's tough now, but things will get better once we have a bit more room to breathe. I just need to hang in there. I believed that someday we would laugh about these days. But then one night, I overheard my husband on the phone after coming home late.
Just broke up with you and you're calling already? That's cute.
Listening in, it seemed like he was talking to someone he had been on a date with. I confronted him and he quickly ended the call. What are you doing on the phone so late?
What? Stop eavesdropping.
He shoved his phone into his pocket as if he were a child hiding something. His behavior was just like that of a child who's done something wrong and is trying to hide it. Would you be talking at this hour if it was someone from work?
God, you're so annoying. I really got tricked by you. I married you thinking you had money. But you have none.
Just like that, he started spilling the shocking truth.
I married you for your dead mother's inheritance, you know?
What?
I never loved you. You are not good looking at all. That's why I'm marrying the daughter of the guy who owns the restaurant chain I work for. She's young and beautiful, unlike you.
Caught off guard by his sudden revelation, my husband continued,
I have already filled out the divorce papers. Grab them and get out. Now.
I stared at the pre-filled divorce papers in disbelief. I was at a loss for words. Wait, This has to be a lie, right?
I wouldn't joke about something like this. I proposed to the boss's daughter today and she said yes. So, we're done.
Are you serious? You can't just divorce me like this. Explain yourself.
All those business trips, all those golf outings, all lies. I've been dating her. I'm going to take over her father's business and become the next CEO. No hard feelings.
I felt as if I had been struck by a hammer. Unable to find the right words, I clung to our daughter as he forcefully dragged us both out. Stop! Let go of me!
I'm getting rid of the nuisances in this house. Hurry up!
Take your hands off me! There was no way to overpower him. My daughter and I were kicked out with nowhere to go. The outside was frigid, almost as if our white breaths would freeze. Unlock the door, please, George! I knocked and rang the bell multiple times, but he never opened the door. I felt utterly lost, holding my young daughter in my arms. I can't let her freeze. I need to find some shelter. The warmth of the baby cradled in my arms was the only thing giving me strength. I had no time to even grab my phone, let alone make a call. But when I checked my apron pocket, I found my wallet stuffed with $30 from my earlier shopping. With a bit of hesitation, I walked into a small hotel I happened upon and asked the elderly couple at the front desk, "How much is a room for the night?" The room cost $50, way more than I had on me. As I was about to leave, the elderly couple asked what had brought me here. The moment I opened my mouth to explain, tears started flowing. They sat me by their warm fireplace and comforted me. After hearing my story, they let me stay for just the $30 I had and even fed me a warm meal. They even provided diapers for my daughter. The next day, while heading home to talk things out with my husband, his car drove past me with another woman in the passenger seat. Rushing home, his car was nowhere to be found. Not only that, the house was locked and I couldn't get in. I had no choice but to wait for him in the cold garage. When he finally returned in the evening, he ignored me entirely, and I was turned away again. In the end, he gave me a meager severance and divorce papers. And that was it. Soon after, I heard he had remarried, this time to his boss's daughter. Still, something nagged at me. The woman in the passenger seat. She seemed strangely familiar. What if suddenly I burst into laughter? I get it. I couldn't stop laughing at the thought that karma would surely catch up to him. First things first, though, I found live-in work and committed myself to supporting my daughter. Before I knew it, 10 years had passed. My once infant daughter was now thriving and even helping out with household chores. Then one day, I was near my workplace. A man suddenly called out from behind me.
Jessica, I finally found you.
You? Why? It was my ex-husband, panting as though he had run to me. He was wearing a torn, dirty shirt and mud-caked pants. His cheek was swollen red, as if he had been punched.
Please, lend me some money. I borrowed from some dangerous people. Next time, a beating won't be enough.
Why? Did you marry the boss's daughter? Weren't you set to be the next president?
About that.
He started to explain. After marrying his boss's daughter, he had received a VP position and lived comfortably. But gradually the business declined. Restaurant after restaurant closed down and eventually the company was sold.
Well, every restaurant is struggling to get customers these days. If that chain restaurant hadn't opened up in the neighborhood, we would be just fine. Can you lend me some money?
My ex-husband looks at me with teary eyes full of hope. Just then, Linda, an employee who has been by my side, chimes in. "Boss, it's almost time." His eyes nearly pop out of his head as he grips my arm tightly.
What? Why are you the boss?
Ignoring the pitiful tone of my ex-husband, I shake off his hand and he steps in front of me.
What's going on? Explain.
His eyes looked almost bloodshot. I could have walked away, but memories of past hardships surged within me. Maybe now's my chance to get back at this man who left me and my daughter. With my emotions in check, I calmly explained how I climbed the corporate ladder. After he kicked me out, an elderly couple let me stay at their hotel when I only had $30 to my name. I started working and living there. The food I made for them every day was well received, so I honed my culinary skills and took over the cooking duties at the hotel. Soon, my cooking became a hit and the hotel became known as a comforting place with delicious food, attracting more guests. The elderly couple, having no heirs, asked me to take over the hotel. I was hesitant because I had no experience in management, but I decided to accept their offer to repay their kindness.
What do you know about running a business?
I have attended seminars and spent sleepless nights studying hard. Now I own not just the hotel but 10 restaurants across the country known for their delicious food. I have even started getting featured on TV and in magazines.
What could it be?
My ex-husband glares at me as if he's realized something.
Was the restaurant next to mine one of yours?
Come to think of it, one of my outlets might be right next to the restaurant run by my ex-husband's father-in-law. I always wanted to succeed and get my revenge on him, but it seems like I've been cornering him without even realizing it.
Oh, is that your restaurant? What a small world. You knew, didn't you? I'll sue you for business interference.
We are running our business fair and square. Who do you think you're hurting by saying that? After all, his restaurant has been on the decline for years, using subpar ingredients and receiving poor reviews for taste. We have always worked hard to offer fresh, delicious food to as many people as possible. If you try to cut corners because ingredient prices were rising, it backfired. You can't fool a customer's taste buds. Unable to retort, my ex-husband blocked my way as I was about to leave.
Let's forget about the past and move on. I forgive you. Let's get back together.
I don't need your forgiveness. How could you say that while you're still married?
She's not a wealthy CEO's daughter anymore. I'll divorce her right now. Besides, she's a huge liar.
Oh, you mean her good looks are due to plastic surgery?
What? How do you know that?
She was my classmate. I recognized her when I saw her in his car before. She had changed dramatically since our student days, surprising everyone at our reunion.
Why didn't you tell me? I was shocked when I saw her old pictures. I put up with it because she had money, but if she's poor and ugly, I don't need her anymore. Let's start over.
I was utterly disgusted by my self-centered ex-husband. It's obvious he's counting on my money. You were happy to leave your ugly wife, remember? And you even abandoned our young daughter. Why would I ever forgive you? Turning my back to him, I walked away and entered my office building. Unable to let go, he followed me and started yelling in the lobby.
Don't abandon me!
This is my workplace. If you disrupt it, I'll call the police.
Don't be so cold. We were a good couple, weren't we?
Stop kidding yourself. If you show up again, I won't hold back. He was escorted out by a large security guard and sat defeated on the curb. In the end, he divorced a woman who was a CEO's daughter. He later found work as a live-in janitor at a friend's office. Hopefully, he'll regret his past as he moves on with his life. It would be nice if he could polish his soul along with the floors. Meanwhile, I'm thriving in my career. We now even provide childcare facilities at work, offering jobs to single mothers like I was back then. My daughter says she wants to become a businesswoman like me and is currently studying. I am really looking forward to that day.
My husband betrayed me. My girlfriend is having a baby, so pack up and leave. He coldly told me so. Are you sure you won't regret this? No way. Just get out of here. He sneered, laughing off my final plea. If that's how he wants to play it, I no longer have any obligation to consider his feelings. I accepted the divorce and moved back to my parents' house. But at that time, I didn't know what was coming next. Who could have imagined that the very next day, he'd be at my door, begging for forgiveness. My name is Lily. My father is an executive at a publicly traded company. After graduating from university, I got a job at a company run by one of my father's acquaintances. It was nepotism, yes, but I worked hard to learn the job so as not to be the subject of gossip. Eventually, my colleagues and seniors began to accept me. I even started to enjoy my work, spending my days in a fulfilling way. Meanwhile, my father seemed worried that I, being totally devoted to work and lacking any romantic relationship, was living a one-sided life. He introduced me to a man named John, who was the most capable among his subordinates, and arranged a dating between us. John is the most successful young man in the team. No, it's all thanks to my superiors and seniors who guide me. My father and John seemed to trust each other. At first, I agreed to date John out of respect for my father, but as I got to know him, I began to think that marrying him might bring happiness. As we went on several dates, I admired how he took the lead. Yes, I was gradually drawn to John. Once my father realized how I felt, he encouraged our marriage. John, honestly, what do you think of my daughter? Well, I am dating her with the intention of marriage. Everything progressed smoothly after John announced his intention to marry me in front of my father. Every time they met, my father and John would happily discuss wedding venues and plans for a new home. Seeing my father like this made me feel that getting married might not be a bad idea. Before our marriage, John gave me a condition. I want you to quit your job and become a full-time housewife. I was reluctant to give up my beloved job, but I really wanted to marry him, so I decided to accept his condition. As soon as we got married, John's attitude towards me changed. To be honest, I didn't want to get married this early. I couldn't believe what I heard. Huh? But you were considering marriage. That's why you agreed to meet me. I only agreed because your father asked me to. I can't refuse my boss's request, can I? John continued with a frown. With your father so enthusiastic, how could I refuse to marry you? Besides, marrying you should secure my career advancement. So you married me for a career advancement? Of course! Why else would I marry a boring woman like you? He scoffed. I was left speechless. I had quit my job and had no income. I had lost my confidence and couldn't retort. Eventually, he stopped coming home and began to frequently go out drinking. When I asked where he was going, he simply said, "It's none of your business." From the perfume he smelled of when he came, it was clear he was seeing women nearly every night. Yet he showed no signs of having an affair with a particular woman. It was probably just business related. I convinced myself. As the wife of a capable man, I thought I had to tolerate this kind of behavior. I tried not to think about it as much as possible. Still, it was a fact that I was struggling with a marriage full of forbearance. I wanted to spill all my troubles to someone, but having quit my job and distanced myself from my friends, I had no one to confide in. If I turned to my family, my father would surely worry excessively, and it might affect John's work. I had no choice but to suffer in silence. Around this time, John was promoted to a division manager at an unusually fast pace. I was glad I hadn't brought up anything strange to my father. Hearing about his promotion was a relief to me. With the promotion confirmed, John had been in good spirits at home lately. Although he still rarely came home, the reduction in his sarcastic remarks and criticisms alone was a blessing. However, I realized that John's cheerfulness was not only due to his promotion. While he was in the bath, I accidentally saw a notification on his unlocked phone. I had so much fun today. I miss you already, even though we just parted. I'm looking forward to our sleepover this weekend. It was a message filled with heart symbols. A message clearly from someone he was having an affair with. The text read, "This weekend is a sleepover." He had told me, "I won't be home this weekend due to a business trip." After confirming John's infidelity, I checked the name of the sender. The sender of the message was someone named Kathy. Afterwards, I decided to find out who Kathy was. Fortunately, John seemed to have no idea that I knew about the affair. He continued to exchange lovey-dovey messages with Kathy without even setting a lock on his phone. From their messages, I was able to determine Kathy's address and full name. Kathy Brown? The name rang a bell, but where had I heard it? As I was desperately trying to remember, a photo of the two of them was sent to John's phone. When I saw the picture of Kathy, I inadvertently let out a gasp. Kathy was the daughter of the president of one of our clients. I had met her once at a company party, and her flashy dress had left a deep impression on me. I couldn't believe that John's affair was with Kathy. It was hard to believe, but the photo, name, and place all matched. There was no doubt about it. But Kathy, I remember the rumors about her. I had to tell John the truth. I told him I had something important to talk about and asked him to come home early. Unusually, John came home without protest and started talking before I could say anything. "I actually have something to tell you too," John said with a solemn look on his face. "My girlfriend is pregnant, so I've decided to leave you and be with her." What? He had taken the initiative before I could talk to him. His girlfriend must be Kathy. But she's pregnant? To my surprise, he said, "It's already decided. I've always been appeasing your father, but after meeting her, I realized how pointless my marriage life with you was. She is the one who's suitable for me, not a woman like you who has nothing to offer. She has everything." "So, you're divorcing me?" "Yeah, that's right. You need to leave this house." I asked John, thinking it was my last chance. "Are you sure about this? You won't regret it?" At that, John burst out laughing. "Regret? There's no way, right? Let me tell you something good. My girlfriend is the president's daughter. She's in a different league from your father, who's just an executive." "Didn't you respect my father?" "Respect? That's just a pose for promotion. If I marry her, I'll become the next president of her company. I can quit my current job anytime, huh? In other words, I no longer need to butter up your father." I don't mind if he ridicules me, but I thought he would be sincere about my father and his work. I can't believe he didn't even have that much sincerity. The moment I found out that, my feelings towards John cooled off. So, I won't say anything anymore. Do as you like. "Yeah, I'll do what I want to do. You don't have to tell me to do." Huh. Even though I didn't ask, John began to talk about her incessantly. "She never told me she was pregnant. Was she considerate of my marriage?" "Then how did you find out she was pregnant?" "I happened to find an echo picture in her bag. She probably intended to give birth alone out of consideration for me. What a courageous woman." Completely smitten with Kathy, John was determined to divorce me as soon as possible and propose to her. He even prepared the divorce papers. If that's what John wants, it's actually convenient for me. I'm tired of seeing his face too. John signed the divorce paper with satisfaction and immediately submitted them to the court. After he was gone, I quickly packed my stuff and headed for my parents' house. And so, my married life with John ended just like that, I thought. The call from John to my mobile phone came the next night. "Lily, where are you now?" "Where? I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong?" "At your parents'. I see. Can you come by to the nearby diner right now? I have something important to talk about." "Why don't you come here if you have something to talk about?" "I can't do that. Please come. It's a request for a lifetime." Reluctantly, I headed to the designated diner. There was John, who had completely lost his energy. As soon as he saw my face, he said, "Lily, get back together with me." "What?" I got stunned, but John began to speak, painfully. "Actually, she turned down my proposal." I swallowed the words. I knew it. "She had a fiancé that her parents had arranged. From the beginning, I was just a game to her." "Yeah, I know." "Also, the child in her stomach wasn't mine." I had suspected that from the moment I heard she was pregnant. It was a well-known story in our company that Kathy was engaged to a rich man from another company. When I found out that Kathy was John's mistress, I tried to tell John about it, but before I could, John quickly dumped me and tried to switch to Kathy. There was no obligation to kindly tell him the truth. Knowing this would happen, I kept silent all along. "Kathy chose me as a playmate because I'm a married man, thinking there would be no strings attached. When I told her I divorced my wife, she coldly brushed me off, saying, 'Are you an idiot?'" I don't feel sorry for John, who was depressed. He brought it on himself. "Well, you can't compare to a rich young man, can you?" Then John looked at me in surprise. How did you know that Kathy's fiancé is a rich young man? I told John that Kathy is the daughter of our company's client. No one in the company doesn't know that Kathy is engaged to a rich young man. I never dreamed that you and Kathy were having an affair. You knew? Why didn't you tell me? I was going to tell you when I noticed you were having an affair with Kathy, but before I could, you told me to get out. Was that the important talk at that time? That's why I asked. Don't you regret it? You scoffed at me and answered, I don't. Remember? So I was relieved and able to easily tell my family the reason for the divorce. Huh. Did you tell this to your father, too? Of course I did. What have you done? It's not too late yet. Take back what you said. Tell him it was a mistake. Don't be foolish. It's too late. Dad is furious. Well, you don't care what my dad thinks about you now. That's not true. I'm telling you, I want to make amends. It's too late. I have no intention of starting over with you. I refuse to be with a man like you, who changes his marriage partner based on his parents' title. But, besides, your true nature is already exposed to my father. I've told him everything, including when you said, I can quit my current job anytime. Is that a lie? Actually, my father said, if so, I don't mind if he resigns right away. But I thought I could get into Kathy's company at that time. Haha, you're full of regrets. I told you to listen to my advice. I really regret it. So, could you give me another chance? Looking at John begging for another opportunity, I coldly declared, there are no more chances. It's your responsibility to take charge of what you've done. I added more fuel to the fire while John was feeling down. Oh, by the way, I finished reporting to my parents, so please, leave our house soon. What? You've been telling me to get out, but that house is what my father bought for me. The title should be in my name. Wait! I'm in trouble if you tell me to leave. Either way, you're going to move out soon. So what's the big deal? What do you mean? Let me see, you haven't been informed yet. You are being removed from your post in New York. What did you say? You're being relocated to a remote area. At least be grateful that they didn't fire you. My father, who was furious about my divorce, took a quick action. He immediately arranged for John to be transferred to a remote area far from New York. It was also a well-known department for layoff candidates. That's a mix of private and public issues. That's not true. Of course, my father was angry about our divorce, but the reason he removed you from the career track is for another reason. You don't have company loyalty or personal integrity. My father calmly judged that such a person should not be in the upper management of the company. You don't mind if your husband is driven to such a remote area? Ex-husband. You and I are strangers now. Lily, don't say such cold things. Aren't you getting lonely on your own? Huh? How naive can you be? You've been saying that you've been putting up with our married life, but it's the same for me. I've been turning a blind eye to your verbal abuse and affairs because I didn't want my father to be sad. I feel refreshed now that I'm released from that. Lily, don't say that. Help me. Shut up. Do your best in your unwanted duties in the remote area. I left my seat without listening to his words, and I left the diner without looking back once. I was wondering why I had been with such an insincere and pathetic man until now. Afterwards, I got help from a lawyer introduced by my father and got division of property. John, who wanted to hang on to the company somehow, paid the full amount immediately by using up his savings. I was grateful that I quickly received what I could get and completely cut ties with John. He, who had his savings depleted by the payment of damages, seems to be leading a rather simple life in the remote area. The most successful young person? That was a thing of the past. There's no trace of him now, and he seems to have aged all at once. On the other hand, I have been living a leisurely life since I broke up with John. When my previous company found out that I was divorced, they asked me, "We really want you to come back." They recognized me, not because of my father's connections. I was moved by that and decided to return to work. I've always liked my job, so I had no hesitation about going back. Perhaps because my father feels guilty about introducing me to a good-for-nothing man, He keeps bringing me potential suitors, but I'm turning them all down. If a good person appears someday, I might feel like getting married. But for now, I just want to enjoy this fulfilling single life a little longer. I returned to work and worked hard, so I have plenty of money. The life of enjoying both work and private life to the fullest seems to continue for a while.
Where's the money I've been sending you every month? David and Sarah look emaciated.
James, my husband, who had just returned from an overseas assignment, yelled at me as soon as he got home. What do you mean? I was shocked and stared at James, not understanding what he was talking about. I've been saving the money. Why are David and Sarah emaciated?
Don't play dumb. You borrowed money from David, right? He contacted me saying they can't afford proper meals. The photos he sent showed both of them terribly thin.
What are you talking about? I hadn't borrowed any money from David. They were fine just a few months ago. It's unlikely for them to become so thin so suddenly. James completely believed David's words and treated me as the bad person. I couldn't let myself or James be manipulated by David any longer. That's the only thing I couldn't tolerate. I had to expose David and Sarah's wrongdoing. I'm Amanda, 61 years old. I work part-time at a local bakery. I've been living alone for the last few years. James, my husband, was assigned overseas. He's now over 60 and works for a construction company, still working hard as a site supervisor. For the past few years, he's been guiding and assisting locals in developing countries and building large commercial facilities. Although I was worried about his first overseas assignment, he seems to enjoy it, getting along well with the cheerful locals. James sends me $2,000 every month for living expenses, so I've been living comfortably on my own. We have a son, David, who also works for a construction company like James. He married Sarah 3 years ago and lives in an apartment nearby. Neighbors say it's nice to have a son close by, but that's not really the case. Since getting married, he hardly ever visits. David left home during his rebellious years, and we haven't been in much contact since. I hoped things would change once he got married and moved nearby, but they didn't. However, it's common to hear that boys don't keep in touch much, so I resigned myself to it. Then one day, David and Sarah suddenly came to my house.
We have a favor to ask.
What's going on?
Well, we need to borrow some money.
Money? Why?
I raised my voice, fearing the worst, like debt. David and Sarah looked apologetic and shrugged. We're thinking of starting infertility treatments.
Infertility treatments?
Yeah, it's been 3 years since we got married and we haven't had a child yet. We thought it's time to consider it.
That's true. But Sarah, you're still in your 20s. Isn't it too early to worry? Sarah responded anxiously.
It's physically challenging if it's too late, and just because we start treatments doesn't mean we'll have a child right away.
That's a good point. I've heard it can take years. I had no idea they were seriously struggling with this.
The thing is, infertility treatments are quite expensive. Sarah works at a grocery store, but honestly, it's tough.
I had heard about infertility treatments on TV. It's a difficult journey that requires a lot of time and money, as I heard from those who've been through it. I wanted to see my grandchild and help my son David if he was in trouble. So I nodded in agreement to David and Sarah's request. I understand. I'll support you both as much as I can. But how much do you need?
Actually, we need about $2,500 a month.
$2,500 a month? It was not a small amount for me. It was more than what James sends me every month. However, with my savings and part-time job, it wasn't an impossible amount.
We'll definitely pay you back, please.
I've always had a soft spot for David's requests. David was finally reaching out to me. Being there for him is what a parent does. All right, I'll deposit it into your bank account each month, okay, David?
That would help a lot. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you, Amanda.
David and Sarah left looking happy. Upon reflection, I had one question. Was $2,500 a month
really necessary for infertility treatments. Yet, considering additional expenses like diet and medical visits, I thought it might be necessary. 6 months later, the monthly payment of $2,500 to David were not easy. While I could manage with James's remittances and my part-time income, I had to be more frugal than before. So I went shopping at a discount grocery store a bit far from home. On my way back, passing a casino, I spotted 2 familiar faces. David and Sarah? David and Sarah were entering that casino. Could it be a mistake? Curious, I decided to follow them. I went inside and looked for them. The place was crowded, and just as I was about to give up, I spotted David exiting the restroom. I followed them from a distance unnoticed. David and Sarah were excitedly discussing something. They sat at a table and started playing. There was David, a side I had never seen before. The game ended quick. David and Sarah seemed upset, probably having lost. I doubted whether they were really undergoing infertility treatments. They should be using their money for treatment, not gambling. They should have managed their finances before borrowing from me. Wanting to confront them, I approached as they left the casino. David, Sarah, can we talk for a moment? What, Mom? They turned around, surprised. Their faces strained. What's this? You have money to gamble? Well, we just came to relax a bit. Relax? You seemed quite experienced, though. Oh, I used to come here with friends during college. College, huh? The more I heard, the more suspicious it seemed. So you don't usually gamble? No, we're just stressed, thinking about infertility treatments. That must be tough. But you seem quite knowledgeable. Is it really your first time since college? David began to fidget irritably under my questioning. Are you doubting me? It's not that, but it's shocking to see you coming out of a casino when you said you couldn't afford treatments. I haven't heard much about the treatment either. Oh, you're so annoying. David scratched his head and sighed exaggeratedly. Shut up. All that infertility treatment talk was a lie. So all the money so far went to gambling? Obviously. If we hit it big, we'll be billionaires. It's stupid not to try such a dream. David and Sarah showed no remorse for deceiving me, laughing mockingly. I felt betrayed after worrying so much for David. I was ready to do anything for him, but he exploited my feelings. Well, then, you won't be needing any more money from me. What are you talking about? If you're not undergoing treatments, you don't need it, right? Well, don't expect a penny from us when we become billionaires. David crossed his arms and looked down on me. Sarah continued with a smug smile.
By the way, we've already spent all the money you gave us, so there's none left. We can't pay it back.
Too bad for you. David and Sarah said mockingly, then turned their backs and left without another word. I was speechless with astonishment. Despite having transferred about $10,000 to them over the past few months, this was their attitude. If I let them continue their reckless behavior, it would lead to irreparable consequences. That's why I decided to stop sending money to David. 2 months later, James was returning home temporarily. I prepared his favorite soup and pasta, waiting for him. As soon as he arrived, James burst out. Where's the money I've been sending you every month? David and Sarah looked malnutritioned. What do you mean? I was stunned and stared at James, not understanding what he was talking about. I've been saving the money. Why are David and Sarah malnutritioned? Don't play dumb. You borrowed money from David, right? He contacted me, saying they can't afford proper meals. The photos he sent showed both of them terribly thin. What are you talking about? I can't believe you. Aren't you ashamed as a parent? I've been sending enough money so you wouldn't have financial troubles, and yet you're borrowing money from our son. What are you doing? James was furious, blaming me for everything. However, I had never borrowed money from David. It was all a lie. I was shocked that James completely believed David's words and didn't trust me. But I couldn't let David and Sarah's lies continue. I decided to reveal everything to James. James, I understand you want to believe in David, But can you look at this? Bank statements, what about them? This is the money you've been sending me every month. What? You have plenty of money. James looked puzzled as he examined the statement. That's right, I'm not struggling for money. And look here. Did you send money to David? Yes, until recently I was sending David $2,500 every month. That much? Were you okay with your living expenses? Relieved that James had calmed down, I continued. I managed with my part-time job and savings. I had saved quite a bit. Looking at the remaining balance, he could see I hadn't wasted money. Then why give David money? He said they wanted to start infertility treatments. Infertility treatments? Yes, they've been married for 3 years without a child, so they asked for money for treatments. That's why I lent money to them. James was surprised, having not heard about the treatments. David and Sarah claimed to my husband that they didn't have enough money to live because of me. So why did you stop the payments? It was all a lie. They weren't going to the clinic. Then where did the money go? This is it. The casino they went to happened to be on TV. It showed people mingling. You don't mean they used the money for gambling? They lied to try and get money from me too? James stared in disbelief at the TV. That's when it happened. Hey, isn't that David and Sarah? Oh my gosh, it is. I never thought they would ever go back. David and Sarah appeared on the screen. I thought they would restrain themselves after I stopped the payments, but they couldn't quit gambling. Unbelievable. The photos they sent me showed them looking so thin. They haven't changed at all. Nowadays, you can edit photos with apps, you know. James, realizing he had been deceived, hung his head in dismay. Maybe his return home was also for David and Sarah's sake. After a moment of shock, James looked up, determined. Unacceptable. I need to have a serious talk with them. Saying that, he headed for the door. Where are you going? To David's house, of course. I'm going to confront them. In a rage, James was about to leave for David's house, but I quickly stopped him. It's pointless to go now. Why? They're at the casino and won't be back until evening. Plus, if you're going, you need to be prepared. I smiled at James. It was time to prepare something special that I had kept hidden until now. In the evening, when we thought David and Sarah would be home by now, James and I headed to David's house. When James rang the doorbell, David and Sarah appeared, looking flustered. What? Why's Dad here? Aren't you supposed to be overseas? I heard you two were in trouble, so I came back. You both seem quite well, though. Contrary to the photos James had shown me, David and Sarah looked perfectly healthy but strained. Struggling for food and money, right? Are you okay now? Yeah, some colleagues at my work have been helping us out. I see. You've been lending money to Mom, right? How much did you lend her? Well, that's... Pressed by James, David glanced at me. He scratched his head and said, That's right, Mom owes me over $10,000. And she hasn't paid back a cent. What do you think, Dad? Terrible, right? Facing David's resolve to stick to his lies, I let go of any remaining affection. That's awful. Do you have any proof? No proof. I lent it to her because she's family, but she's not paying it back. David's fake tears were met with Sarah's concurrence.
We're struggling too, so we told her we couldn't lend her more money. She got angry, saying we're family but won't help.
Is that true, Amanda? I did lend money, but I never borrowed any. Assertively denying their claims, David and Sarah's protest grew louder. Lies! She's deceiving you, Dad.
Don't believe Amanda.
James looked at them coldly, clearly fed up. I had no time for their charade. To end this, I took out the evidence from my bag. Look at this, my bank statements and the promissory notes I had them write when lending money. That's a lie. David stammered, trying to grab the evidence from me, but I handed it all to James. In fact, I showed them all at home, but James reacts as if he's seeing them for the first time. What's this? You borrowed money from Mom? That's not what I heard. There's a reason for that. What's the reason? David stiffened as James's voice grew colder. James, always strict, must have instilled fear in him. Sweating profusely, David struggled for words. It was for gambling money, right? What are you talking about, Mom? That's ridiculous. Really? But you were on TV today. What? I showed them photos from my phone. I recorded a snippet of the show on my phone. David and Sarah appeared several times, wearing the same clothes as they were right now. Their faces turned pale at the photos. That must be someone else who looks similar. This isn't proof.
You can't tell if it's us from that.
Ignoring their denial, I presented several more photos. The photos contained pictures of him going in and out of the casino. Actually, I hired a detective to follow you, David, Sarah. They found out you've been going to the casino several times a month. What's this? They were speechless at the photos and investigation report. Also, the lie about infertility treatments. You haven't visited any clinic for months. Got anything to say? Realizing there was no escape, David sighed and feigned nonchalance. I thought you'd be easy to deceive, Dad. What did you say? I laughed so hard when you called in panic because of my email. If I knew it was this easy, I should have asked for money from you from the start, Dad. David's mocking laughter made James clench his fists on his lap. Did you enjoy deceiving me and your mom? Oh, it was hilarious. If only Mom hadn't been so perceptive. We wanted to win more.
Really, we could have earned so much more.
David and Sarah showed no remorse. Stop mocking your parents. Do you even realize you're doing something wrong? What? Borrowing and lending money within the family is fine, isn't it? Don't sweat the small stuff. Borrowing money? You don't even repay what you owe. Shut up. It's natural for parents to financially support their children, right? Don't make a big deal out of it. David seemed to think it's okay to do anything because we're family. But reality isn't that forgiving. I decided to confront David with the harsh truth. Listen, even within a family, lying to borrow money can be considered fraud, you know. Fraud? Yes, you tricked me out of money. I'm consulting a lawyer, so you might hear from the court soon. The mention of court panicked David, so I pressed on. The lawyer says there's a potential for fraud charges because the promissory note says it's for infertility treatments, but you never went for any. Then let's sue. David stood up as James spoke calmly. Wait, sue your own son? Are you really that heartless? What? You swindled money from us? And you're saying that? I know what I did was wrong, but wait on suing, please. Then will you repay us? Silence fell over David. It seemed he lost at betting again today. I don't have any cash on hand right now. I'm really struggling for money. I know. The detective said you might be in debt. So you're in debt. Having a hard time repaying. That's why you can't pay us back anytime soon. I squeezed David's hand, feigning sympathy. How sad. We didn't realize you were suffering so much. Sorry. Yeah, as parents, we should have paid more attention. We need to guide you to the right path from now on. James gently patted David's back. Mom, Dad. David's voice was pitiful. We smiled at him. First, admit your wrongdoing and repay the money. That's important. Why does it have to be that way? Borrowing means repaying. Teaching you the right thing to do is our duty as parents. We resolved to provide no further financial support. It's time for them to manage on their own, like adults. Come on. David and Sarah were visibly disappointed. Eventually, they were ordered to repay all the money they borrowed from us. James, of course, also cut off all financial support for David to prevent further gambling addiction. It's our duty as parents to guide them onto the right path. David and Sarah started working longer hours to repay their debts. Too busy to even think about gambling, they were considerably thinner. Sarah wanted to divorce to escape the debt, but David refused. With no money to hire a lawyer, they couldn't even afford a divorce and continued their married life. Despite their apologies, I had no intention of forgiving them. Adults must pay for their mistakes. A few months later, James finished his overseas job and officially retired. Having working non-stop, James had many things he wanted to do in retirement and recently got into camping. We went camping by a lake the other day. We really enjoyed our time together for the first time in a long time. With the money James had sent me and his retirement funds, we weren't financially troubled. We planned to spend our remaining years leisurely, just the two of us.
I'm Alvina, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My family of 4 includes my husband Morris, our 2 daughters who are in elementary school, and we also live together with my in-laws on the same property, making us a household of 6. Before marriage, I worked a job with night shifts, but Morris suggested, "I'd rather you quit if it means we don't cross paths as much," so I chose to leave my job. Since then, I devoted my time to raising our children when they were young and worked part-time when things got a bit more manageable. I wasn't very keen on the idea of living with my in-laws. At the point of contemplating living together, I was still uncertain about what kind of people they were, regardless of how wonderful they might be. I believed that a daughter-in-law living with her in-laws could lead to stress. So I felt relieved when Morris assured me before our marriage that we wouldn't have to live with his parents. However, right after we got married, Morris brought up the subject of living with his parents, saying, "I'm worried about my parents. What about living on the same property? It's not like we will be living in the same house, right?" I was taken aback and protested, but Morris countered, "Do you dislike my parents that much? We will live on the same property but separately. I just want to be near in case something happens. If our situations were reversed, wouldn't you want to live with your parents?" I found myself unable to refute him. My parents were still fit and healthy, living with my brother and his wife, so we were not going to live with them. I think that's why Morris could say things like, "If the roles were reversed, I would live with them." While I was still undecided and had not given my approval, Morris told me after a while, "My parents have already started building a house on our property. We can't refuse now." And so, we were forced into living together. Although I was unhappy, I managed to negotiate one condition. We will not interfere with each other's lives. And so, our shared property living arrangement began. My in-laws adhered to our agreement of non-interference. We led separate lives in our respective homes, and I joined them for meals once or twice a week. The house they built on our property was beautiful, and I even began to think that it might be a lucky break for us since we would inherit it eventually. However, that was a big mistake. My mother-in-law slowly started breaking our initial agreement. At first, she would visit our house once or twice a week and ask for help with tasks that I felt were reasonable, such as, "My back hurts a little, can you carry this?" Or, "I'm not feeling well today, can you prepare dinner?" However, over time, she started making demands like, "Isn't breakfast ready yet?" And, "Why hasn't our part of the house been cleaned?" As if it was a given that I would be doing all the housework. As a result, I ended up cooking all 3 meals and cleaning both houses. Morris didn't say anything about this. Only my father-in-law would say, "Sorry for always asking you to do this." Sometimes he would kindly offer me some snacks and say, "I know it's not much, but please have this." Not only did my mother-in-law make me do the housework, but she also started interfering with how we educated our children. She started saying things like, "They should take these lessons," or, "It's strange that your 2 girls don't help with housework. What did you give birth to 2 girls for?" Yet every time mother-in-law lashed out at me, father-in-law would come to my defense. "You remember we had agreed to manage our respective homes, right?" Father-in-law would chide mother-in-law, who would say, "Oh right, I forgot. I guess I'm feeling weak and unwell, so I might have leaned on you a bit too much. I'm sorry." And she would apologize, at least on the surface. But a few hours later, when father-in-law wasn't looking, the harassment would start again. Even when I tried to tell Morris that this wasn't what we had agreed on, he would just say, "Even if you made an agreement at first, we're family, aren't we? We should be flexible when times get tough. It's your fault for not handling it well." I spent my days filled with frustration, and then, suddenly, mother-in-law collapsed at home. We quickly called an ambulance, but mother-in-law passed away from a sudden seizure. I couldn't tell father-in-law or Morris, but part of me was relieved that the harassment would finally end. Despite our agreement to not interfere in each other's lives, father-in-law had always been kind to me, and I felt differently towards him. I did my best to take care of him and his needs. Father-in-law often thanked me, saying, "I'm sorry for breaking our agreement not to interfere. I just can't handle housework on my own. Thank you so much." Our daughters were very fond of their gentle grandfather, and we spent many peaceful days together. But sadly, this peace didn't last long. Just a few months after mother-in-law passed away, father-in-law suddenly collapsed too. Father-in-law survived, but he was bedridden and needed constant care. During a discussion about father-in-law's care, he mentioned wanting to go to a nursing home to avoid being a burden, but Morris stepped in. "Don't say things like that, Dad. Family should care for each other. Nursing homes are for when family absolutely can't. Alvina said she's okay with taking care of you," he said, completely taking me by surprise. I did love father-in-law. I wanted to do whatever I could to help him. Even if he went to a nursing home, I was planning to visit him frequently, but caring for him full-time at home was a different matter entirely. It was clear that Morris wouldn't help. As a stay-at-home mom with young kids to look after, taking care of father-in-law would be a significant challenge. But I couldn't express my reluctance in front of father-in-law, who was different from mother-in-law. I had no choice but to agree to his care. As expected, The caregiving was quite difficult. I needed to assist him with meals, bathroom visits, and bathing. Father-in-law was a robust, elderly man, and as a member of the opposite sex, we both felt uncomfortable at times. Every day, I'd assist with the kids' school preparations and breakfast, do housework during the day, care for the kids when they got home, and prepare dinner, all on top of caring for father-in-law. Every night before going to sleep, I'd think, I somehow made it through the day. Then I would just collapse into bed. Morris, instead of helping with father-in-law's care, started spending even less time at home, citing work as an excuse. He claimed to have overnight work and only came home about 2 to 3 times a week. Furthermore, because I never knew when he'd come back home, I often struggled to prepare dinner in time. On days when my body ached from the sheer exhaustion, I prepare something simple. But even then, Morris would rage, I'm working my tail off there, and this is the thanks I get? When I asked him for a little help around the house or with caring for his father, he retorted, You're a full-time homemaker, aren't you? Caring for my father is your job. I felt miserable every day. This distressing situation dragged on for 3 years. My 2 daughters grew older and began to help with housework and caring for their grandfather, which helped lighten the burden. Chantel pitched in every day helping with cooking and cleaning. Janie tenderly wiped her grandfather's back each day, asking, Does that feel good, Grandpa? I was truly grateful to have such kind daughters. One day, Morris left his mobile phone at home when he went to work. Despite knowing better, I couldn't resist the temptation to take a look inside his phone. The password was his birthday, so I could unlock it instantly. What I found inside was a succession of shocking revelations. Unbelievably, Morris had been having an affair since around the time I started caring for his father, and they even had a child together. From their text messages, it was clear that Morris was also supporting his mistress financially. Although he'd given me money for living expenses and said, I'll save the rest for our children's future, he hadn't saved a dime. The messages got worse. My kid's already in elementary school, so he's not cute anymore. And caring for the old man is a pain, but thank God for my idle wife. It's a waste of money to put him in a care facility, but having my wife do it is free. Gotta make use of free labor, right? LOL. He was ridiculing me and our children. Under normal circumstances, I should have kept my cool and stayed silent until I had definitive evidence, but I was so furious, I couldn't remain calm. As soon as Morris got out of the bath, I shoved his mobile phone in his face and demanded, What is this about? At first, Morris seemed a little taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. You've lost your femininity since you had our kids, he said, scorn filling his words. You've stopped wearing makeup, and your outfits are all about comfort. Since you started breastfeeding our second child and falling asleep with your mouth open, I felt completely turned off. And when you began caring for my dad, you lost even more of your femininity. You're not even a middle-aged woman anymore, more like a middle-aged man. His cruel words tore at my heart. But he didn't stop there. You know, my girlfriend always wears makeup and takes care of her appearance, even after having a child, he continued, coldly asserting. I have no plans to divorce you for appearance's sake, but my love is for her and our child. I'm not sure who'll go first, but once my dad is gone and our kids are adults, I plan to kick you out and live in the house with her. And so he continued to spew words indicating he considered me nothing more than trash, even though he appeared to have some concern for the children. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I too want to dress up and put on proper makeup, but you didn't help with childcare or housework at all. Juggling unfamiliar childcare and trying to do housework perfectly, I had to do it frantically, even if it meant messing up my hair. If you wanted me to look beautiful, why didn't you help with housework, childcare, or even the elder care? And even without a payback, shouldn't a husband and a father naturally help out? I pleaded through my tears, but my words didn't resonate with Morris. That's not true. Look at other women. They stay beautiful while raising their kids. As I've told you many times, it's just that you're not efficient. You, a stay-at-home mom, have no right to argue with me, the one who's putting food on the table, he coldly retorted. If you have a complaint, you're free to divorce, you know? For a woman in her mid-30s like you, employment opportunities are limited, right? You think you can raise our 2 kids just because you'll get a bit of alimony and compensation from me? He sneered. I felt struck in the worst possible way, and I couldn't say anything in return. Thinking about the children, I felt I couldn't divorce. Seeing this, Morris said, You can't, can you? If you care about the kids, you'll take care of my father until the end. After that, you'll work as my housekeeper. But don't worry, when the kids grow up, they'll help you out. So you better treat them well. He then went into his room with a satisfied smirk. For a while, I was dumbfounded and remained in place. Somehow I managed to regain my sanity and went to attend to my father-in-law. I intended to act as usual, but it must have been clear something was wrong. My father-in-law asked, Is something wrong? I tried to brush it off, saying, Nothing at all. I couldn't hold back my tears, and I ended up telling him everything. After hearing me out, he said, "Alvina, I have something to give you. Can you come back in a few hours?" I did as he asked, and when I went to him after a few hours, he handed me a piece of paper with someone's contact details and said, "Contact this person." He then added, "They know everything. I should be the one taking action, but with this body of mine." He smiled brightly. A few days later, Morris told me, "As I told you before, I will be on a business trip for a week from now. Well, I guess it's better for you too if we call it a business trip, right? I will enjoy the sightseeing, so I decided to take this opportunity to take action." And a week later, "Hey, what the hell is going on? I come home and everything is gone?" Morris was raging and half panicking when he called me. I replied, "Oh, my, how was your week-long affair trip? Did you enjoy it?" Morris shouted, "Hey, stop messing around. I'm asking what the hell is going on." I decided to explain to Morris. The contact that my father-in-law gave me was for a Mr. Quarry, an old friend of his and a well-known, large-scale landowner in the region. Apparently, Mr. Quarry had always coveted the land where my in-laws' house stood and had been trying to negotiate for it. However, my father-in-law would always refuse, saying, "I plan to leave it to my son." But after observing the behavior of his son Morris and hearing my story, he seemed to have decided that his son was a lost cause. We had known in advance that Morris was planning to take a week-long affair trip because he was openly defiant and didn't try to hide it at all. Before that week, I had a talk with Mr. Quarry and we arranged to sell the house and land. It was a piece of land that Mr. Quarry had wanted for quite some time, so he was willing to buy it at a price considerably higher than the market rate. And during that week, the house was demolished. My father-in-law had requested Mr. Quarry, "This might be a bit selfish, but given the circumstances, could you do the demolition during this period if you're planning to anyway?" So when Morris came back, all he found was an empty lot. And we're going to have a new house built with my money my father-in-law got from selling the old house and land. Upon hearing this, Morris tried to persuade me to return to him, saying, "But you're jobless, aren't you? Even if Dad builds a house, you can't expect to be supported for the rest of your life. What are you going to do without my income? It's going to be tough, right?" I replied, "Well, don't worry about that. I did have some concerns about that part, but my father-in-law and Mr. Quarry have done quite a bit. I got a job offer from a company run by an acquaintance who happens to be looking for employees." And then I asked him, "Morris, shouldn't you be worrying about yourself instead?" When Morris suspiciously asked, "What do you mean?" I told him, "The company where you are working now, you got it because the president is a friend of your father's. But now that he's deciding to cut ties with you, he's spoken to the president. Feel free to fire him if this work is poor and he's committing adultery." The president responded, "It was hard to say, but he's been acting like he can't be fired and causing trouble. Let's see what happens from tomorrow." All I heard from the other end of the line was a surprised, "What?" Then silence. He tried to excuse himself, saying, "Well, I mean, I might have said some things out of anger before, like I was going to leave you in the future, but come on, that can't be true. Don't take it seriously. We're family. We should stick together, right? Can't you mediate between me and Dad?" So I told him, my family now is my daughters and my father-in-law. Goodbye, and hung up the phone. There were numerous calls from Morris after that, but I ignored them all. Later on, my divorce from Morris was finalized. I claimed compensation from Morris and his mistress. As Morris hadn't tried to hide his affair at all, I had gathered plenty of evidence. All of this information I heard from various people, such as the president of Morris's company, who was a friend of my father-in-law. Although it seems like extramarital affair wouldn't have led to this firing, astonishingly, Morris was embezzling company funds to support his double life. Morris was not only fired from his job, but he's also being sued for damages. He lost his home and job and tried to move in with his mistress, only to be dumped when she realized he had no money. On top of all of this, he was ordered to pay child support. Now Morris is spending his days job hunting while working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and child support. As for me, I plan to live with my daughters and my father-in-law in a fully leased house until I move into the house my father-in-law is building for us. When father-in-law offered to build the house, he said, "I'm moving into a care facility. I want you and your daughters to live happily here, Alvina." I countered, "What are you talking about, Dad? We're family. Besides, it would make the girls sad. Let's live together." Hearing this, my daughters also took father-in-law's hand and said, "We want to live with Grandpa." With tears in his eyes, father-in-law thanked us. While the girls do help out, caring for him while working is indeed tough, so we are currently enjoying our life together as a family of 4 with the help of home assistance and day services. We can't wait to move into our new home as a family of 4.